All right, welcome to our webinar back to school series that Platform has been excited to be hosting with many PE teachers from across the country. My name is Doug Curtin. I'm the director of content here, and I've been lucky enough to host and get to connect with a lot of the PE teachers that are joining our webinars as well as presenting on them. Today, we'll be talking with Molly Collins, who will get to introduce herself in a second. But as always, a friendly reminder that you'll be getting a recording of this webinar as well as the slides after today's session. Our focus today is on emphasizing basic fitness and mental health, and Molly's going to dive into that topic. But Molly, before we do, it's always helpful to just know who we're talking with. You've been on a few of our webinars and done a fantastic job in the past, ranging topics from your 3 Ps, which you'll talk about briefly, your women in fitness class, and all different types of things. But for those that are maybe meeting you for the first time, if you wouldn't mind just giving your little introduction and background of your role as a teacher, where you're at, all those great stuff.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Collins. As you can see there on the screen, I am the high school PE teacher, one of them at Pennfield High School in Battle Creek, Michigan. This will be my 8th year at Pennfield. Prior to that, I was doing elementary school teaching at Hamilton over on the west side of Michigan. Absolutely loved it over there. If anyone's ever been to the west side of Michigan, it's gorgeous. I formerly was the varsity softball coach. This year will be my first year. I will not be coaching anything. It will be a bit of a transition for me, but diving a little bit more into strength and conditioning as I am getting my master's in applied exercise science with a focus in strength and conditioning and graduating here in December. So really excited to kind of dive deeper into that and hopefully have my CSCS by the end of the year. And yeah, I'm excited for this new little transition I'm going to be going through.
Awesome. And obviously, you know, with that and everything in mind, our focus today is going to be on the PE side of things. But Molly has a lot of different background in teaching different age groups, different grade levels, working with different types of students, as well as, you know, what we like to refer to as, you know, the general population. We're not just talking about athletes, we're talking about everybody at school and understanding the different unique challenges that they come in with. Before we dive into the actual kind of focus and agenda of today, Molly, why don't you just spend a little bit of time talking about those 3 Ps? I think it's something that guides your teaching and something that we've talked about actually at length on some of our other webinars before.
100%. So I, a few years ago, really wanted to brand myself with my teaching. I didn't want to just go in and say like, these are my rules, this is my philosophy. I really wanted to be like, you know what do I go about in my everyday life and how it applies to my teaching. And I always say, like when Pennfield hired me, they hired Molly Collins and what that was all about. So the 3 Ps stand for purpose, passion, and pride. And I really believe that everyone in life has a purpose and it's our jobs as teachers. And we have the very unique job as a phys ed or health teacher to be able to draw out these purposes in a little different ways. And then goes for passion. If you aren't passionate about something, you're not going to want to do it, right? And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that when we talk about how I'm navigating mental health this year. But having passion in what they're doing, these students are going to be able to work harder for you, work harder for themselves, and then get more people on board, which then goes into pride. If we're prideful in things and we have an ownership in not only ourselves, our school, our community, it just makes for a more well-rounded and good experience within our classroom, and hopefully for these students to go on and be successful in whatever endeavors they do.
Awesome. And you touched on it, but we have a great agenda of what we're going to cover today, from just talking about understanding all those different things that students are coming to our doors with, especially coming off of a year like this past year with COVID, being remote, a lot of the isolation that comes with it. We'll then dive into kind of the emphasis that you're putting on your books, your book club approach, and talk about the actual books you chose and why, and then actually dive into what that's going to look like in your class. So why don't we start there, Molly, and talking about, some of the things that you're coming into, both from not just, hey, here are the things we have to cover from a fitness perspective or PE perspective, but also sort of the unique challenge that PE often has to kind of bear the burden of addressing some of the mental and social emotional aspects of a student as well.
Yeah. So I would just want to put this out there first and foremost. I am in no way a specialist in this means whatsoever, but I'm speaking to the choir when I'm saying that we know that there is a mental health issue and a social interaction issue. Especially coming off of a year when we really didn't have any interaction, or at least in my situation, I had only a few months of interactions with my students in person. And, that goes not only teacher to student, but also student to student. And I actually had an opportunity last week to do freshman orientation, and I'm meeting this new class of freshmen. I'm also working with the juniors and seniors, and I'm seeing firsthand some of the issues that are going to come to bat in the first few weeks of school, if not the whole year, just with like the social cues that are being missed, or they want to stay close knit right to the one person they know, and they're scared to kind of break off and get with other students and get to know them. And whether that's a health concern of like they don't want to touch other people or don't want to be near other people, or if it's just honestly they haven't interacted with anyone. So as I said, I know I'm speaking to the choir that we know that this is an issue. Well, we really need to be able to kind of look at the bigger picture and realize that as a specialist teacher, we need to figure out what new ways we can incorporate mental health and social interaction into our curriculum, even though we're doing it already, but what other lengths can we go to do so?
Right. Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's, almost why we led with the title of emphasizing or almost re-emphasizing some of these points that we might forget about. The other side of coins, obviously, and you touched on it a little bit, is, we tried our best while remote. We did everything that we possibly could, but we knew some things were going to slip through the cracks, both in the social interaction. It's different to interact online versus in person, but also being able to give technique and form feedback. A lot of people started to get their kids back in the second half of the year, and they had a lot of things that they wanted to kind of like pick apart and dissect because they weren't able to give that feedback week over week to their kids in person consistently.
Yes. And that's where, if you've heard me speak before, I really do put a large emphasis on technique and movement over working muscles, because I want to be able to get into that motor learning, like really emphasize like, hey, let's slow this down. Let's make sure that we're doing the movement patterns correctly. And then hopefully that will lead them into success when we go into more in-depth training. And then in other aspects, for people who've never been in a phys ed class before, anything like that, they just don't really know what's going on. It makes everything a level playing field, and hopefully helps build that connection between the students, but also build their trust in me and the trust in themselves that, hey, I can do this and I can trust myself to move on to the next phase. So that's really the big emphasis, is I want to be able to create more frequency within them doing basic movements. I don't want to just drive them to fatigue in terms of, hey, any ways possible, get that bar up or whatever it may be.
Sure.
I want to make sure they're doing it correctly so that we can avoid injuries. I don't want them to get hurt. And that's, I think, a huge population of us, but we want to make sure our students are safe. And that's number one. Absolutely.
So we just kind of picked two gigantic things that we want to be able to focus on, and we're going to try to cover it all in one webinar, but also throughout, one semester or school year as well. So it's a lot to break down, but let's first focus in on that kind of book club idea that you came up with and talk a little bit, about sort of that cross-curricular approach you're taking. So before we even dive into the books that you chose, where did this idea come from, or what were you kind of ruminating on, thinking that, maybe we should kind of layer in something past just the physical fitness activity type stuff?
Yeah. So myself personally, I am big into like motivational type books, self-helps, memoirs, things like that, reading of successful people and how they did it, because I want to try and mimic those things in my own way. But then also, it's just like the people you surround yourself with, right? Like the 5 closest people you surround yourself with, that's who you're going to more or less like tend to have those same habits. Well, I want to continue to learn every single day. So I try and dive into different books of role models I've had in the past. And I'll talk about 2 of them here later on. But, cross-curricular is a huge, topic within education, right? Especially within PE, any of the arts. And they want to get us, how can we help support the core? And it's no doubt that the core really suffered this year, from math to English to social studies to science. And obviously we did as well. I don't want anyone to hear that I'm not supporting us, because I am. But it's going to be a team effort. And I think that's the number one thing that we have to remember, is that this is a team effort of how we're going to support these students. And taking the cross-curricular book club matter and adding in the literacy of reading along with the literacy of physical education, how can we combine that to help create a more self-aware student and a more confident individual? So that's why I decided to take to my admin this idea of, hey, can I use a book as more or less my textbook for the year next year? And, you know, as soon as I brought up the cross curricular, it was like, boom, yep, you're in, you got it, whatever money you need. And I was like, oh, that's all I had to do, right? So I used 2 different books, and I'm actually going to do a third as well. If you guys are fans of Platform, you probably have heard me talk about Alan Stein before, and he kind of touched on this book, Raise Your Game. I reached out to Alan. He was more than happy to help me out with even some PDFs and things to do within my classroom regarding this book. But he does a really good way of like talking about not only how he was successful, but how other people within sports and business were successful. And he interviewed them and talks about their stories and implements it to little key points within each chapter that we can reflect on and that we can add in as like discussion-based questions within the classroom. And I really love that. And then this Choose to Matter, I will be using in my women's fitness class. Julie Foley is just an amazing, athlete, but now commentator and writer and just motivational speaker in general. And she really talks about like the aspect of females and what we can do to empower ourselves. And I love this book. The same thing at the end of each chapter, she has like little key notes or key questions that you can ask yourself. And so I have decided to use these 2 books and then another one called AMRAP by Jason Khalipa to really focus on, okay, here's the literacy piece. We're having our students read, but then also we're engaging in discussion regarding these tough topics within these books that a lot of people want to shy away from and don't want to talk about. And it's how to be successful. What are your weaknesses? And how can you attack those weaknesses and make them better day in and day out?
Yeah. And I think, just to jump back to this slide to kind of ping pong back and forth a little bit, the idea here for you, Molly, is very much to try to take this book and layer in some of that, social interaction and different things as well, because it's not, hey, read, and I'm assigning, assignments that they're just submitting to you. The idea is this is going to provoke different types of conversations and, both organically and, structuring them into class time during warmups and exits and cool downs and applying it to the workout. We'll get that a little bit more, but the theme really is that, you haven't done this book club approach in the past, but the idea is to really kind of add this in to see if past just kind of the typical stuff we layer in as PE teachers organically, we can have a little bit more structure behind it and have some kind of anchor points to have conversations around.
Yeah. And awesome. That's there. You don't have to, like, a lot of people don't think, oh, book club, like who's going to want to do that? And you're right. You have to be able to identify your students and be able to find a book that would be relevant to them. And that's why I chose the 3 books that I chose, because they do have a little bit more of a sport background, but they also have the aspect of life that's going to draw in those students who aren't necessarily sport minded, right? Sure. And you have to be able to do both. And that's why I chose these ones, because they really do a good job of not just how can you get better in sport, but how can you get better in life? And sports, as most of you know, like it was just our leeway of being able to be successful. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So see a couple questions coming in about what the third book was. You chose Raise Your Game, which we have up on the screen, Choose to Matter. And what was the third one, if you don't mind just saying it to everybody that missed it?
It's called AMRAP, AMRAP, stands for As Many Reps as Possible. And that's by Jason Khalipa.
Awesome.
He's the first CrossFitter who won the male side of the CrossFit Games back when they first started.
Fantastic. So like you said, these are your books. I think there are a lot of great options that other teachers can choose from. You've been at the school for many years now, and you have a really good relationship with your students and have chosen these books for different classes too. You mentioned the Choose to Matter is going in your female fitness class, your women in fitness class that we've talked about in the past. the Raise Your Game class is going to be used in some of the strength and conditioning and weightlifting classes. And like you said, doesn't just dress athlete stuff. It talks a lot about life and all of the different things, but tons of other, book choices that people can certainly select from as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Can I comment one other thing on that?
Sure.
So another one, if like you're thinking like, I like this idea, but like, how am I going to get the kids to read, or how am I going to get copies, or whatever it may be? Another good option is something like this. It's a book called Kindness Boomerang. My mom gave this to me years ago, and it's 365 days worth of like different challenges you can do for each day. And it gives an act, a quote that regards to that act, and then a reflection. So you could even challenge your students, say, for example, pay respects to someone. So you could have someone go up to someone and give them a compliment. And if they give that compliment within the day, say they get extra credit or whatever it may be, you can manipulate it however you need within your classroom. Sure. It doesn't have to be this big, broad concept. It can be as small as you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into what it's going to look like in class in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk just a little bit about the fitness as well, and then be able to kind of bridge the two ideas together. So first things first, obviously, we talked a lot about hopefully bringing students back in, helping them have conversations, do this different types of stuff. But what about the actual fitness education, right? What about the meat and potatoes that make PE? And you talked a little bit about those first few weeks, dedicating time to the basics. So talk us through what that looks like, how you do it, what the class, feels like for your kids as you bring them in to class, where you're doing it, all of the different pieces that kind of make up those first couple of class periods.
So for me, and I know my method isn't for everyone, I pretty much start all of my classes off on the same foot. We're all doing body weight movements, no more than say like a PVC pipe or a band, to do these movements within workouts. And we honestly don't even walk into the weight room for like the first few weeks, because I am so dedicated on the fact that I want them to get down the movement patterns of being able to squat. Can they perform an air squat properly before I even put them on load? Can they perform the hinge, the lunge, the push, the pull? I want them to be able to do those movements properly, body weight wise, then simulating resistance with a PVC pipe or a band to then be able to go into the weight room. And sure. Again, it's just putting everyone on that level playing field and to help build confidence. And honestly, even some of my more elite athletes and who are taking my class, I start pinpointing little things, and then some of my other students realize, oh, there's no reason for me to be intimidated by that person.
Sure.
B, wow, she's really going to nitpick me and really going to make me better. And then hopefully by the third point, they're going to realize once they get into the weight room and they start performing these movements with more resistance and more load, that they're going to have better results, right? And once they get those better results, that's where, they get that sip of the Kool-Aid and they want to keep going. And that's the goal with that.
Absolutely. So that's great. And a focus, like you said, is just everybody kind of entering in level playing field, not rushing some kids in. And, it's either a review for some people or a much needed introduction, but one way or another, everybody's going to benefit from that a little bit. And then, your partner finishers, I think probably worth just giving a little bit of guidance for those that use platform. Know within platform, there's different finishers and different things that, are a little bit kind of like, 8 to 10 minute workouts or different time ranges that are kind of fun ways that a lot of them are partners or teams of 2, 3 that you've created or adapted as well within your program, so that, like you said, kids can work with each other. They can start to make some of those connections, like through those workouts, not just through conversation in other areas as well.
Yes. And I don't care what anyone says, healthy competition is good for everyone. And to be able to teach them how to win, how to lose, and how to be a good teammate is super important. And it's something that we can teach within our classroom to help, again, better on when they get into the real world, whether it's their sports teams, whether it's a career, whatever it may be. And it just adds fun when you're able to work with other students. You're just pushed a little bit more, and there's a competitive edge. And a lot of times, I give, different, whether it's, hey, you guys can leave a minute, 2 minutes early to go to lunch, or hey, you guys, I get lots of stuff from the military, so you guys can get a water bottle from the Air Force, winners do, or whatever it may be. Extra credit is always a great one that I can bribe them with. And it just adds more fun. It adds a little bit of competition, which is 100% needed within our classroom.
Sure. Awesome. Excellent. And, you know, we use this one just as an example, Molly, obviously, just to kind of reemphasize just how important it is to review, go over the basics, continue to kind of hammer home things. You know, you picked the Hinge is probably the toughest one to come back to, especially from a summer break. A lot of people forget certain things that they've maybe learned in previous years. Talk us through why this one stood out to you, just kind of a fun example to pick apart a little bit further.
Yeah, well, I think the squat is a tough one as well, but that's so big. Like, we can at least identify that to so many different movements in our everyday life, from sitting down to standing up.
Sure.
That the hinge is just so awkward because they don't realize it's a hinge, like a door. They think it's a squat, and they don't necessarily know the difference between that movement of hinging at the hips and drawing those hips back compared to driving the hips down in a squat. And so it takes a lot of detail, and it takes a lot of time and slowing it down. And a lot of the kids don't want to go slow. They just want to rip through it so I can get to the next thing. And once they figure out that, hey, like, I'm going to teach it, I'm going to break it down with a bunch of drills. I'm going to have you watch it. I'm going to teach it again. I'm going to have you break it down with some drills. And then I'm going to have one of your peers come up and show me whether it's a student who's doing really great. And then we bring a student who's struggling with it a little bit, and the students can identify, hey, what points within their body are they struggling? Like, if I tighten my core, maybe I can get my back flatter. Or, hey, maybe put a little bit more emphasis on drawing your butt backwards, and
Sure.
That's going to help tighten your hamstrings, or whatever it may be. Like, the students then, if they can identify where the movement's failing, that's going to help them as well, because now they're going to be able to identify it with themselves.
Sure.
So I really like to use students as an example, not to point them out and not to be rude or seem as if bullying, but I want them to be able to see a good movement pattern and a bad movement pattern, or just not as good, I should say, to identify what makes that movement proficient and what makes it not quite there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just another added element in using this example as a way in which we're kind of taking and furthering those connections that students can be making and social interactions with each other in a positive way. Like you mentioned, you know, giving feedback to each other is a skill that I think many adults could probably still practice and benefit from, but this is another opportunity and area which we can do that. So this is just an example of one of the platform videos that can be incorporated into the class that Molly will sometimes use as well, in terms of the videos, pairing it with it so that, you know, everybody's kind of on the same page when it comes to starting to give feedback. Similar language points, similar types of points of performance. We won't watch the whole video. It is embedded in here. So if you want to check out the full video, you can, but we'll click play here. Give me a thumbs up if we can hear it.
The hinge too is something you do all day long, simply picking something up off the ground, maybe your backpack every day in class. We want to make sure we do that safely and effectively by pressing the floor away and lifting to full extension, something we will learn with a good morning, our first step in learning that hip hinge.
We're going to start our good morning by stacking our feet directly under our hips. We're also going to want a soft bend in the knee. To initiate the movement, we're going to send our hips back and begin to hinge forward while maintaining a flat back. Athletes will return to stand. What we're going to want to avoid is rolling forward with a rounded back. We're going to want to cue our athletes to maintain a neutral spine throughout the duration of the movement.
Awesome. So that's just one example. As Molly mentioned, there are ways that we'll look for things and also use these videos to help give people some of the, you know, different feedback that will allow them to interact and know the right verbiage, language, everything else like that, so that they can become some of those student to student teachers as well and continue to kind of enhance that. Moving on, just to kind of put this all together, we've talked a little bit about the book club idea. We've talked about the kind of key elements of what we're doing in fitness and how we're teaching the basics and emphasizing it over, those body weight movements into PVC pipes. Now let's combine those two pieces, Molly, and maybe walk us through kind of this example of what a class would look like and how you're going to take both the ideas around your book club and the different things that you're looking to do within fitness and blend it into one class so that it can kind of all come together.
So first and foremost, I'm going to have the students entering the classroom, and I have a whiteboard in my classroom, but I also have the ability to do a projection. And so I want to start off with having a quote from one of the books up there, from say the chapter that was assigned for that week. And for example, the Alan Stein book, the very first chapter is talking about self-awareness. He's like, you need to be able to embrace the people who tell you you are a piece of crap. So there, it's like a boom. It's a quote out there right away that it's like, what the heck does Miss Collins mean about that? And so it's going to intrigue them. They're going to want to know, like, well, what makes Miss Collins a piece of crap, So have that conversation, be vulnerable. And then we're going to start the warm up. So after I take my attendance, we're starting the warm up. I did put no music, but also too, after I got thinking about it, the reason why I said no music to start was because I want to be able to have a focused conversation and discussion while they're warming up. If you and your students are comfortable with it, 100% have just like a low volume music playing in the background. Sometimes that helps students as well, and myself included. And we're just going through guided questions, and within that particular chapter for the week or whatever it may be, maybe you're asking what's something that you're good at, and you have a few students say some things they're good at. Very simple. Keep the question simple. What's something that you don't enjoy? So again, I'm not saying something that you're not good at. I'm saying what's something that you don't enjoy. And most of the time, if you don't enjoy it, you're not very good at it, right? So kind of start the wheels turning a little bit. If you don't enjoy something, does it mean that you don't have to do it? Now we're getting a little bit more in depth, and a lot of students are gonna be like, yeah, I don't like doing it, so why would I do it? Well, sometimes you have to embrace the suck, right? And you have to do something that you don't necessarily enjoy, which then you could relate to school, because a lot of them don't enjoy going to school, say they don't like going to math class, whatever it may be. So then you can start drawing in and start to have a little bit more of a in-depth conversation. It can spark different questions. And then maybe the last one would be like, what do actions help you create? And then, the goal is for them to start saying like habits, because then after we go through, we're starting to teach the materials, say within the Hinge movement, using that as our example. Maybe do a variety within that movement. So we're not necessarily doing a deadlift, but we're doing a bent over row. Show them that you still need to be able to perform a proper Hinge movement in order to do a different exercise than just a deadlift. And then you're doing I'm going to use like an example of one of the platform ones, the minimal equipment program, and the conditioning at the end are shuttles. And within this particular day. And so for the shuttle runs, okay, they could do them on their own, but let's have races. So now we're adding that competitive piece, and you're stacking them up randomly. We're not necessarily going against the fastest kid. The fastest kid, it might happen that way, but let's just have a little bit of a competition. And then once we're cooling down, we're having this conversation. Let's get into now, hey, in order to exit my classroom, let's do an exit question. Tell me one bad habit that you have, because habits create actions. And so then you've briefly gone over it. And a lot of this is like nothing new that we're not doing in our everyday life, but we're incorporating it to a book where they're getting advice from a different person, not us. And a lot of times that's all they need. I always say, like, my story can help implement and change one person's life, but it's not going to reach all of my students.
Sure.
And we want to be able to, how many other voices can we get in there who have a significant story that can relate to someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that, and a great way of kind of layering in those two parts, being able to build both the fitness pieces simultaneously with the conversations and being able to have, meaningful discussions that kids can take things from and be able to go with. So that's awesome. To just sort of wrap up before we open it up to questions, Molly, what we always kind of do is just try to put this all into perspective. And I think you do a great job of really emphasizing, like you said at the beginning, the role of a physical education teacher being so much more than just, checking boxes of, did they learn how to hinge, which will be great. We want that to be a part of it, right? But there's a lot more than that. So any kind of just like final thoughts or pieces of advice that you kind of want to share with the group, feel free to kind of wrap up here, and then we'll turn it over to questions.
I just always thought, one of the reasons why I was drawn to phys ed to begin with was the flexibility and the open-mindedness of within the subject area, that, you can use your creativity and the things that you're passionate about and your purpose to implement how you're teaching it. And it's okay to be able to ask for help in different areas if it's not your, forte. Like if mental health is like something you don't feel comfortable talking about, but it's something that your students need, there is absolutely nothing wrong with, and I highly encourage seeking out someone in your community or anything like that that can help you implement that portion of social and mental intellectual health into your classroom, because obviously we're going to get the physical, that's easy, but there's so many different components to health. So reach out, get as many opinions and people wanting to volunteer, and they're going to want to, because it's so important. I use the military like they're my best friends because they've become my best friends, but they have so much to offer. I use platform. There's so many different things within platform, from yoga to the new mindfulness program to now the dance program. And it's good to kind of mix things up and show the students that it's not just one way or the highway and how they can be healthy. Try and give them as many different topics within physical education to realize that, hey, this is what makes a healthy person. And it's not just, I have to go into the weight room and lift. You can do so many different things within our subject area, and that's why I love it.
Awesome. And I think that's a great place to sort of wrap up and conclude. You touched on it, just being, aware and mindful of all of the different resources that are at your disposal and not trying to kind of carry the load and burden by yourself. Being able to tap into different resources can make a big difference, not just within, platform or any other tool that you use from curriculum or digital tools or anything else like that, but even just those simple things of, like you mentioned, using other people's voices to just tap into some of the people that might not be able to connect with you and feel like that. So this is awesome. And I think a great place to sort of just transition into some questions. And I've seen a few trickle through to start. One that came through that we answered separately, but I think worth just kind of sharing with the whole group. Molly, you talked a lot about PVC pipes. They're a great investment for just about any PE teacher out there if they haven't already gotten them. But the question is sort of around size and what to look for. Do you want to just talk through what you try to do, what your goals are in terms of kind of mimicking a barbell and the size that you typically go with there?
Yeah, so I try to get about a 5 to 6 foot PVC pipe. And then for the girth of it, I guess you could say, width,
diameter.
There we go. That's the word I was looking for. I go with a female size bar, so it's a little bit smaller, because, we are working with, if you're a middle school teacher, you're working with students who are up to, 11 years old, maybe 12 years old. Mm-hmm. So their hands are not ginormous like myself. So you might want something just a little bit thinner in diameter, but I'm striving to around 5 to 6 feet for the length of it. And you want to mimic ideally a barbell, because as you start to progress in terms of actual weight training, using the PVC pipe is going to be a great asset for you, for the students to be able to control that PVC pipe, which then will relate over to controlling a barbell. And a lot of people, be like, oh, there's no reason, there's no weight on it, so it's hard to move. Yes, you are 100% correct, but you can get a great workout in with a PVC pipe and teach them about body control and how you can add different resistance just by engaging different muscles and squeezing them, and the importance of squeezing and contraction and things like that. So
Absolutely. Awesome. And I think, some people go with 3/4 of an inch diameter. Other people go with an inch. Like you said, different size hands. Sometimes it is better to get a range of sizes there so people can kind of be able to grab onto what makes the most sense. A lot of different questions as well that I see coming in, Molly, around middle school. Some questions around fitness and programming that I can help address, and that there are certainly introductory programs within platform that you can use that are very applicable to middle schoolers. Intro to fitness, intro to training, some of those different things Molly mentioned of yoga, dance, and things like that. Molly, I'll let you kind of answer in terms of the books, in terms of their kind of age appropriateness, if they're a little bit more geared towards high schoolers, if you have any ideas for middle schoolers, anything along those lines, in terms of the books themselves.
the books themselves, I think, especially the Choose to Matter would be great for any age. It's ideally more towards females. I think I would say the Raise Your Game is more towards high schoolers. Just by the way he articulates in different scenarios. I will say though that there's a couple other books, say Wolf Pack by Abby Wambach. It's not very thick either. If you're like me as a reader, the thicker it gets, the more intimidated I got. But this was a really quick read, and it gave, again, the same topics of like creating good habits, how we can help each other, whether we're on a team or what that team looks like, whether it's your friends, your family, your actual teammates in a sport. But this one would be a really good one, Wolfpack by Abby Wambach. And then AMRAP by Jason Klepa, I think would be a good one as well for middle schoolers. Another really quick read, not bad. And what I love about that particular book, and I plan to use it with my foundations class, so my primarily freshman class, is that at the end of like each chapter is a workout. So I can even use those workouts, whether say it's on a day where I'm going to do a team type workout. Okay, we're going to do this workout from the book. Now it's just giving an extra little incentive as to why we're using the book, what this workout has to do with the chapter and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So, I think, you'd have to kind of research around, but there are so many good, I guess motivational self-help memoirs. Anything by Pat Summitt is going to be great. And
Yeah.
You can't find anyone telling you different because she's great.
Sure, absolutely. So lots of good book ideas there. Another question that came through, Molly, is just around sort of the way you choose to run different units in class. I know it's different for each class, but how do you typically structure kind of like jumping around some of those things that you did mention, like yoga, dance, things along those lines? Is it sprinkled in week over week over week, or do you kind of dedicate more like blocks to it?
I've changed it up. I've done it both ways. So in particular, how I'm going to be running this year is I'm going to go sprinkled in, and my women's fitness class will be starting I decided to use it as a Y Center type schedule. So on Mondays, they have this type of class so like say yoga. On Tuesdays, they have Pilates. On Wednesdays, they have dance, so on and so forth.
Sure.
That way they're getting each week, they're getting a variety of different types of movement. Mm-hmm. And I love that way. Hopefully they're not getting as bored, right? They're not doing a full unit for a 3 weeks long, 4 weeks long, whatever it may be. And each time they do a lesson each week, they're getting different topics and they're building off of each other. We're not just like, okay, we're going into an advanced yoga session. Like, no, let's still break it down. They're still getting to know the motor learning aspect. For my other classes, for my weight training, my strength and conditioning, we're going to start them with that, the basics, right? They're doing the body weight, they're doing team and partner workouts. And then once they get comfortable, they get transitioned to the weight room. And then once they are feeling like they are somebody is when I tend to hit them with the dance. And yes, 100%, I have all boys classes doing dance, and it is the most epic fun thing ever, because when I choose to do it towards the end of the semester, end of the year, the reason why I do that is because now I've built their trust, and they've built trust in themselves and with each other. If I were to put that on them first and foremost, for males especially, they're going to shut down and they're not going to want to learn from me. So I build their trust, and then I hit them more with the dance and more vulnerable type units.
Sure.
For girls, I hit them with those units first because they're more comfortable with those ones.
Right.
They're not as comfortable with weight training. So then I ease them in the opposite direction.
Gotcha. So sort of start your units with things that you think people might be a little bit more kind of receptive to, knowing that, you know, you can build up some trust, some confidence within your kids, and then start to do some of the exposure of things they might be a little less comfortable with, depending on the group that we're working with there as well. So
I do yoga every week though, and my students love it. So there's one designated day, usually on a Friday, where we do yoga every single week.
Awesome.
And it doesn't matter what class.
Excellent. A lot of other good questions I've sort of seen trickle in. I think we've answered most of them. If not, please feel free to reach out to us. I've included all of my contact information. Hopefully I can get you the answers. And if not, Molly can always kind of jump in and share her information as well. Lots of great ideas that we've sparked along the way, and a lot of questions about books and different things along those lines. If people do want to learn a little bit more about Platform, as I've seen a few people that aren't super familiar with it here on this chat, that if they're not using it currently, please feel free to go right to our website. There's lots of great info directly on our website. You can learn a little bit more, even request a demo and explore it. Molly, anything else you want to close with? I know there's a couple lingering questions that I see you typing answers to, but anything else you want to address before we wrap up?
Not really. I hope you guys have a good year. I know, last year brought a lot of challenges. Hopefully we learn something from it and we put into focus what's really important. And for me, my big takeaway from last year was remembering the impact that we can have on our students, and that it's not about necessarily teaching them, details of topics and things like that, but getting to the root of who they are, how to help them think, and how to help them think, not teaching them how to think.
Sure.
And I think that's really important, because when you can tap into like challenging them in terms of how, like, what does that mean to you? What are your real values? Are your values going off of your friends and who you're hanging out with, or what you truly believe? And that just goes into, like I said, the philosophy piece, and teaching them, what's your purpose? What are you good at? What are some passions you have? And then what's that pride factor? So
sure. Awesome. And a great place to close. And again, thanks to Molly in particular for sharing her time. Obviously, all of us here at Platform are super grateful of all of our PE teachers, but Molly does a lot of extra energy and attention to try to put out webinars like this. So we're super appreciative of Molly and appreciate you sharing your insights on all these different topics. And as Molly said, we wish all of our teachers the best of luck as they do head back into a new school year. We hope that we can be a helpful resource here at Platform. And if there's specific things that you want to see on future webinars, podcasts, articles, please feel free to reach out to me, and we're happy to try to put together, what's going to be the most relevant and engaging for you all as teachers. So with that, we'll close up. Thanks so much. And we wish everybody the best as we head into a new school year.